Dr. Paul, you can come on up.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be here, and thank you, Pastor Shane. You have a very unique pastor here, and he is gifted in many, many ways, and they're all good, but very unique blend with his background in exercise and health. So I have great respect for that. So I agree almost 100%. No, I agree 100% with everything he shared. This is great. And I'm probably going to overlap a little bit with that. I am a physician. Graduated from medical school over 40 years ago. And I went into family medicine. And so that's kind of a little bit of everything. And I ended up changing my route, and it was probably around 1990 or so. I put down here integrative medicine. Well, integrative medicine, it's kind of integrating alternative complementary options, but I didn't know it had a name at the time. The way I got into this was through prayer. There were a lot of things in my practice that I would see. I would have no idea why this person would develop this disease or that, and they'd already been to specialists and they had no answers, and I was a little frustrated. I would pray and just ask the Lord, show me what to do, and there were times He actually did, and I had no idea. So just be obedient, do what I say, and the patient gets better. Then I thought, wow, I need to learn some more about this. What else don't I know? And so this just kind of mounted on itself. And over time, someone told me that's integrative medicine. I go, oh, great, it has a name. And I found out there were other doctors that did it. And then I found that a lot of naturopaths out there were doing some of the same treatments. I go, wow, they know about this too. But most of it was involving nutrition. There's another name, though, that came out later, and that was just functional medicine. And it's just a different way of looking at integrative medicine, but it's looking at disease from a functional perspective. What is actually causing the disease? And this is where you can actually reverse things. Yes, you can reverse type 2 diabetes. You can't eliminate it completely. You can control it, but you can get it. I have people that have gone from the stratosphere down to earth again and controlling it with very little, if any, medication being necessary. But it was just their choice. And you're absolutely right. People have to make that choice. I look at what I do as kind of like the parable of the sower. I'm giving lots of information. I'm giving the good news to everyone, but not everyone responds. And you have a small percentage that actually take it and they have a bountiful harvest. But it's very hard to get everyone to accept everything. So what I mentioned about nutritional medicine, almost everything I do is using nutrition, and that is the key. I am board certified in nutrition, and that was thanks to my wife. And she said, "Oh, well, that's you need to do this because you've been doing this for years." So, yeah, nutrition is the key and the focus on everything I do. I'm going to try and give you a little bit of a different angle and approach to your health and your body. And this is what I do with all of my patients, one-on-one. But my approach is the human body is the most intricately complicated engineered vehicle on this planet. And I just tell them, every one of you is, this sophisticated red-hot Ferrari, and it is you're way more complicated than that, and you're worth a lot more than that. And I want you to learn how to drive your vehicle. Oh, I know how to drive. And I go, come on, there's more than one gear. oh, no, there's just one gear. No, there's multiple gears, and I'll tell you about all these little dials and levers and things that you can drive your vehicle better. In fact, did you know that you can change lanes? No, I'm fine in the carb lane. No, you can go into the fat lane if you'd like. And that's metabolic flexibility. And most people in this country, and around the world, but mostly in this country, they're not metabolically flexible. And if they try to go over into the fat lane, oh my gosh, I've got headaches, I'm nauseated, I have shakes, sweats, they're carb addicted. And that is the big part of our problem. But I try to get them metabolically flexible. It's not about driving in the fat lane forever, and it's not driving in the carb lane all the time. But I tell them, and if you want to take a little break, go off the highway, take a pit stop, and head back on, that's fine. But just learn how to drive your vehicle. And we're going to talk about not just driving the car, but how to fuel it. And we'll get into that. So, optimizing health through the temple. And I have given this talk in a lot of different venues and many times to professionals, but I don't put it within this context of the temple. But this is the way I look at the body. This is the temple that he gave us. And it behooves us to take care of what he has given us. So we're going to talk about optimal health. Americans in 1720, Americans in 2020. I'm sorry, that's just the reality. What is health? So what does the Bible say? So in Genesis 1:29, he's talking about giving all of these plants, the trees, the fruits, the seeds. That is our food. And then after the flood, he said, every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. So again, we have meat added in. So, there are a lot of people that, feel, well, vegetarianism is the way to go, or to be a vegan is the way to go. You can't eat meat, and meat's bad, and so we'll talk about that. But anyway, God designed the earth to provide nourishing food. That's what he gave us. And if you find honey, just eat just enough. Too much of it and you'll vomit. So this is all about moderation. We're not going to be eating. It's not that, honey is good, so I'll just eat a lot of it. No, we want to have a balance in everything we do. But then the context here, again, about the body being the temple, 1 Corinthians 6. Do you not know that your bodies are the temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. So you don't have the right to treat your body like trash, and don't have renter's mentality. Okay? Oh, it's not, I can do whatever I want. I'll trash the place. No. He has given you great responsibility to take care of this temple. This is the only one you have. And he says, I want you to steward this. Okay? You don't have the right to eat whatever you want. And remember, he looks at us as being part of his army, soldiers. We're disciplined. Okay? We need to take care of our bodies. We need to take care of everything we put into us. And again, like Pastor Shane, I don't eat 100% perfect all the time. I try, but those are choices that I make. So I'm not going to, this is a complicated slide. I just thought I'd throw in there, why do we age? Our body's falling apart. Well, a lot of it has to do with our lifestyle, and a lot of these changes here are affected. So starting off at the top, there's this integrative area, dysbiosis. That's the gut bacteria. And what we eat affects the gut bacteria, what is promoting. And this affects everything from our brain to our immune system to our hormones, and of course, gut function. It's a very deep topic, but that gets out of balance and it causes aging, including the dysbiosis giving off these toxins like lipopolysaccharide, causes damage in the brain. There's a lot of inflammation. And that's the next one, chronic inflammation. It gets set up in our body, and that causes age. Altered intercellular communication. This is communication with inside the cell with various hormones and other molecules, and this causes aging. Stem cell exhaustion. Stem cells, as you know, those are the ones that create, you have stem cells when you're born, lots of them, but they're the progenitors of all these other types of cells. And we end up having fewer and fewer and fewer. We can't make those, but there are ways we can. Cellular senescence, that just means cells are getting old and they finally die. Mitochondrial dysfunction is behind everything, and all the diseases. I think you mentioned about, well, the food is related to all of our chronic diseases, but mitochondrial dysfunction is behind almost everything I'm taught to treat, with a few exceptions. Deregulated nutrient sensing, that has to do with your ability to respond to nutrients, say like insulin and glucose. Disabled macroautophagy, we're going to talk about that. That has to do with the mitochondria and being taken out when they're supposed to be taken out. Loss of proteostasis, what? That's a big word. It just means that the proteins inside of our cells are kind of getting messed up. They're not folded right, and they're broken, and we lose a lot of the function there. Epigenetic alterations, we're going to talk about epigenetics, and that is the code that controls your code. You think your genes control your cells and what they do? No. The code on top of the code, epi means over, we're going to get into that. Telomere attrition. Telomeres are those little bitty balls on the end of those chromosomes there, and you're somewhat limited on how many cell divisions you have. And anyway, we start losing these telomeres, and finally, when you've used up your number of telomere fragments, you end up dying as far as the cell goes. Genomic instability, well, your genes have mutations and things like that, and that also causes aging. So, do we have to age? Yes, but not everyone ages exactly the same. And there are a lot of opinions out there what a healthy lifestyle looks like for optimal health and longevity, but what does research really suggest is the most efficacious way to live? And as Pastor Shane mentioned, my gosh, there's so many opinions out there, and you have these extremes. But what I want to focus in on is these areas of nutrition, exercise, fasting, heat therapy, cold therapy. You mentioned some of that at the end, but it's about putting these together. So I look at it with nutrition being the center focus. Okay, that is everything. And that's 90% of everything. We were talking about exercise. I look at exercise as about 10% of the equation. And yet, if I talk a lot about it, it's like, wow, that's the main thing. No, it's actually not the main thing. The main thing is nutrition. Then I talk about these little stressors being exercise, fasting, cold therapy, heat therapy. These are stressors that are put on your body. This is the way you were engineered. Okay, this is what's good for your body. And as you spend a little bit of time in these areas, these extremes, you don't stay there, you just come back. And after doing that, your body has actually built itself stronger. So we'll talk about that. And what is the optimal diet? It depends what your goal is. So here we go. This is your Ferrari. So, as I mentioned, your body is a Ferrari, and I tell my patients, look, we're going to come up to the We're coming in for fuel. We're going up to the gas pumps. And you have a choice here. This is a Ferrari. Do you want the low octane? Or do you want the stuff with the ethanol added? Or, oh, God forbid, the green handle. And I tell them, don't put the green handle in. I go, if you put the green handle in, you won't make it home. And this is a Ferrari. You'll destroy this very expensive vehicle. Well, this is what everyone does. And I was telling this to someone recently, and they said, I did that. And I go, what'd you do? Oh, I put the green handle in. And I was 30 minutes down the road in the middle of nowhere, and I'm just sitting there waiting for the tow truck. What did I do? Oh my gosh, I put the green handle in. And that's what we do every day. And we're thinking, well, this is just normal food. It's not normal food. Let me tell you, in America, we have one of the worst diets in the world. We have the worst health statistics, period. No one really comes close as a second to us. We're just way out there. We eat whatever we're fed or whatever we're offered. And you're bombarded with advertisements. If you look at the commercials, they're either about junk food or about drugs, okay? And Big Pharma owns both of them, by the way. Big Pharma owns Big Ag and Big Food, and they have for a number of years. So, what a blend. So, with that said, going back to the fuel and putting in the right fuel, I tell them, look, you've got to do this. You've got to really think about what you're putting in. And as I mentioned, the food from out there is not real food. It's fake food, okay? Even from the age of 3, okay, we were told this is normal food. All the breakfast cereals, it's not real food. It's fake food, okay? It's nothing but garbage. It doesn't cost them much to make. They charge you a lot, and it's nothing but mostly sugar and chemicals. But that's what we're giving to our kids, and they're addicted. So we addict them to high amounts of sugar from this high on. Why? Because all kids love sugar. I go, well, it's not that way around the world. I've practiced and lived in a lot of different countries, and as a physician, and it's not that way. So not only are we going to fuel our Ferrari right, but we're going to have vehicle maintenance. And that is, we're going to change the oil every now and then. And what kind of oil would you like? Would you like the high-tech, motor oil for this Ferrari, or peanut oil? Yeah, whatever. Okay. No. You won't even make it home. Your engine will seize. Well, we have to maintain this vehicle, and that's where all the nutrients coming in our food. We want nutrient-dense food. And then I tell them, you cannot leave that Ferrari in the garage. Well, it's too expensive. It's dangerous. I don't like driving it. Well, if you let it sit in the garage, you're going to have decomposition of the oils, and the seals will break, and that very expensive vehicle will be trash. It will rust. You need to get it out. You need to drive it on the road, and then you need to every now and then just kind of, and that's the way your Ferrari was engineered, and that's where the exercise comes in. Oh, I don't need it. No, this is the way God designed it. So when I'm looking at this temple, I'm thinking, this is not about science. This is about the mind of God. Now think about it for a minute. Because people think, well, I don't know anything about science. You don't have to have a science background. You just have to understand that you are living in God's creation, and He designed you. It works great. And so, well, what do I do with it? And I go, you put the fuel that He told you He gave you. Think about it. All of the food scientists out there, I'd say the vast majority they're not believers. They don't believe that God created you. They don't believe that there's design. They believe that you evolved. But we can evolve even better. We have better food. We have newer ways for you to eat, okay? But this was never designed for your body. But that's what everyone is eating. Going back to the stats in America, we have roughly 50% of the country, almost 50%, is obese. Then we have a high percentage that is overweight. And then we only have about maybe 10% that's normal weight. Now, I will say the stats here in California are much better than where I live in Oklahoma. We have one of the worst stats. But as far as our weight going up, it all started back in the late 50s, 60s. And we started changing everything. We started telling people that fat was bad for you, fat made you fat, fat causes heart disease, neither of which is necessarily true. There's a little bit of truth, but it's not the whole truth. So fat is bad for you, and so we're going to take that out, and you have your proteins, fats, and carbs, shrink the fats. The carbs come in, they fill in the vacuum, and that's what happens. So in 1965, we had about 1 to 2% diabetics in this country. And then after that, because that was when that was changing, we started having an increase. So in 30 years, by the mid-90s, we had over 300% more diabetics. Okay, but it was a linear line like this, and from 1995 to the present, it went. We are now so high that roughly 50% of the U.S. is either diabetic or pre-diabetic now. So that's shocking. But in 2002, I remember the cover of Time magazine showing this 10-year-old girl. And she has diabetes. Big deal. Kids get diabetes. No, that's type 1. This is type 2. So, we're seeing kids even younger than 10 develop type 2 diabetes, which is adult onset that used to be in the 4th or 5th decade when it would start showing up. But now it's because of what we're feeding our kids. And people think, well, that doesn't happen to my kid. Have you had them checked? They're trying to push legislation to get Ozempic funded to give to 5-year-olds. Okay, and that's utterly ridiculous. That's the answer? No, it's changing the diet. But we're not going to do that. I hope we will, but so everything just skyrocketed, and we have not only just the diabetes doing that, we have the weight, we have the heart disease, we have degenerative diseases, we have autoimmune diseases, and then we have an explosion of Parkinson's. We have an explosion of Alzheimer's. And Alzheimer's dementia is now referred to as type 3 diabetes because there is a component of insulin resistance dealing with these neurons. And so it's all part of this whole package. But again, these food scientists, they're not going to believe in the God we believe. They're not going to believe that this is harmful in any way. Again, they're getting paid for what they do. So there's a little bit of motivation. So diet is the core component for health. It's the fuel which allows you to perform optimally. And if you don't have the right fuel, forget about performance. So, a balanced diet. Key components: plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables, inclusion of nuts and grains, varied sources of protein. I like variation, and so does your body. I tell my patients I do not teach diets. We could talk all day about 50 different diets that are out there. I'll give you a smattering of some of the common ones, and what's behind them. But I do like variation. But, a lot of peoples around the world have lived well without disease using variations. Some are, fruitarians, and some are vegetarians, and some are in the Arctic North, And they're living off of whale blubber, seal blubber, a little bit of fish, and so fat and protein, but almost no indigenous carbs. Well, you need carbs. And I go, well, technically you don't. I'm not telling you to eat like an Eskimo, but they actually don't have heart disease, and they don't have stroke risk. Ours is like 700% above theirs. But if you take them off the tundra and then you feed them our diet, they look just like us. And within 10 years, they're having events, cardiac events, strokes. Okay, so it's not a genetic thing. So I must emphasize that the ideal diet is going to vary. So genetics plays a role. I have patients, for example, MCAD, that's medium chain acyl dehydrogenase. Anyway, it's an enzyme deficiency. They can't metabolize fats. Well, guess what? We're not going to feed them fats. They can't eat fats. They can't metabolize some of these. And there's a lot of variations on that. Then we come to SNPs. Anyone know what SNPs are? Yeah, one person. Okay. Single nucleotide polymorphisms. That's the factor that makes every one of you unique and different. Okay? When you have your DNA, you have your little 4 base pairs, and those 4 base pairs are the alphabetic code for writing your genes. Well, if you take one of those 4 base pairs, okay, and just change one in a sequence, that makes a huge difference as far as how your body's going to function. You have 3 of those base pairs coding for an amino acid. Say this is an ATT, there's ATGC. ATT, and you change it to ATG, you're going to get a completely different amino acid. You throw that into that protein, and it doesn't function right. So how does that translate to you? Why does one person, we'll just say, take a medication and they get a whopping headache, or they feel sick to their stomach, or, oh my gosh, this is horrible? It's because of SNPs, okay? You don't metabolize this in your liver through an enzymatic pathway the same way he does, okay? So you're going to get sick. Well, it has to do with food in the same way. And we end up getting a bottleneck sometimes because of these slow enzymatic reactions, and these people will have awful symptoms. So there are things you can do as far as avoiding those factors. Looking at diet with the lifestyle. Endurance athletes versus sedentary individuals. I'm not going to give them the same diet. Specific goals. Are you trying to lose weight? Are you training for a marathon? Or are you trying to bodybuild? Completely different. So the ideal diet for a person may change as their goals change, and also as their age changes. So I mentioned epigenetics, and that's the code, epi over, the code on top of the code. So has everyone heard about epigenetics? No? Okay. So what that is, okay, if we have, the genes are 4 base pairs, that's your alphabet. Okay, well, the epigenetic code is kind of like a computer code, which is, it's binary. It's 0s and 1s. Okay, well, the epigenetic code, I look at it this way as, okay, it's either on or off. I'm simplifying something really complex, but is this gene turned on or off? Most of the genes inside your cells are turned off. You don't need that gene over there because you don't need to grow another ear. Okay, that was back when you were developing. There's a lot of them, but every cell in your body has the complete library. But that cell says, you know, I'm a bone cell, and I only want these genes in operation. And so there are things we can do to turn these on and off, but it's probably one of the most important discoveries in our lifetime after sequencing the gene. The lifestyle choices you make and what you're exposed to may not alter your epigenetic code, but that of your children, because people think that the genes, these are what I pass on to my kids. Well, actually, when you eat certain ways, certain things are flipped on. When you go through certain stressors, this affects your epigenetic code, and you can actually pass that on. And they've done studies with people out of World War II that went through traumatic stress, and then they studied their offspring, and they found, wow, and it was actually different, the effects on these particular genes, be it whether they were male or female. It's interesting. Whether that gene would show up and express in the first part of their life or later. But the point is that that's crazy. The way I live and what I do, I can pass on to my children. But we can change our genes no matter what age, as far as the epigenetics. We can change those at any age. So here's a list of some of the popular diets. That's kind of busy, a lot of verbiage there. As far as I have 9 different diets, and we can come up with well over 50. But the keto diet, everyone's heard about the keto diet. It's a low-carb diet, produces ketones, and it's the only diet that you can actually objectively measure. If you're measuring ketones in the blood or urine, you can tell whether that person is compliant with that diet or not. But it's basically using fat as a fuel. And I started using keto diet type principles back in the 80s. And this is what Pastor Shane referred to. And we didn't call it a keto diet back then. And at the time, we still thought that the ketones were just byproducts, waste products that were worthless. And then we found out they're not worthless. They're like the main player. We'll come back to that. The paleo diet, eating what the cavemen supposedly ate, eliminates mostly the gluten-containing grains, legumes. They believe that man is an evolved being, and this is the way you ate, millions of years ago, and so therefore we should eat the same way. And the reason we have problems is because we're not eating the way the cavemen ate. Well, it's not exactly that way, and a lot of the grains that we have, they've been modified. And again, many of them have way more gluten than they ever had. Okay, talking with farmers when I lived in New Zealand, I'd ask them about their crops, and I said, "So this wheat that you're growing, is this the same wheat that you had, back when you were growing up?" And they go, "Oh my gosh, these look like monster wheat compared to the wheat I grew up with." But they were all modified, and so when you check the composition of these various plants, they're different. We've done a lot to change our health through a lot of these processes. They think they're being more efficient. They're getting really big, robust heads of grain, but that's not the all in all. The vegan diet, nothing that is produced by animals. You're going to eliminate everything and all dairy products. And again, this has more of a motivation where we're all animals on this planet. God created us all equal. No, there is no God. I forgot about that. Okay, we're just all animals, and you have to be kind to every animal and every creature, so we don't eat any. Okay, be kind, and whatever you do, don't have any dairy, because that's taking advantage of cows. Okay, I'm being a little facetious here, but I don't agree with that. I don't have a problem if someone wants to be a vegan, but for the reasons it's promoted and touted, I don't agree with. Vegetarian, no meat products, but can still have animal products. Well, if you lived in ancient Israel, you would not have been a vegetarian, okay? Everything was about meat. Barbecues, every day, all the time. Well, that's cruel. I don't like a God that tells you to make barbecues. Well, I'm sorry, but that's the God we serve, and He gave us this meat for food. Not taking it too out of context. The FODMAP diet. Well, this was something that came out of gastroenterology back in the last couple decades. It has to do with removing these plants that are fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. And they did this so that people that were suffering with irritable bowel syndrome could have some relief. But when I saw it come out, I thought, they're kind of on the right track, but not completely. And they don't know what to make of it, so they go, well, we're just going to cut everything out, and then after a while you add that back in. And it can help some people. There is some benefit, but it's not the comprehensive thing. It's, again, you have to add foods back in. You can't live on that diet for a very long time. So that's not the answer to people with irritable bowel syndrome, but it can help to a degree. The carnivore diet mentioned earlier, only meat products are consumed. You get weight loss, and you have reduced inflammation, mental clarity, and it's very simple, but it's very expensive, and it's kind of hard to do. And there are problems long term as far as not getting all the nutrients you need. Your microbiome changes. You're not going to be having the high fiber. So I do use this, and I can go into it a little bit in a second here. The next one being Atkins, low carbohydrate diet by Robert Atkins. He was a cardiologist who came up with this, and boy, he was thrashed for having this diet. It's basically a keto type diet. It's a low carb, a fair amount of protein, but they said that's going to cause heart disease, and you're a cardiologist, shame on you. Well, we don't have any studies that show that the Atkins diet causes heart disease. Okay, heart disease, and I'll see how much time we have to go into that, dealing with atherosclerosis and what really drives that. I'll make the comment, insulin resistance. And insulin resistance, dealing with its effects on what happens to your endothelium. That's the lining of your blood vessels. And what affects that? I'll see if we have time, and we can do this in the question and answer later. But explaining that, you really get into the weeds. It's very hard to navigate. There's so much research going on, still coming out, multiple studies every year. And it's kind of turning things up on its head right now as far as our understanding of how this atherosclerosis really takes place. Dean Ornish, he's been around for quite a while. Lacto-ovo-vegetarian diet emphasizes low-fat diet, whole foods, and exercise to prevent and reverse chronic disease or heart disease. They have some studies, but they're kind of limited. But he would say that he can prevent heart disease. You have less than 10% of the fat, so all fat's pretty much bad. Doesn't allow that much, but it's very, very low fat. The Mediterranean diet I threw in here, it's really just a description of the way the Mediterranean peoples lived. It came out of Harvard following a study by Ansel Keys. He was a nutritionist in this country, researcher, and he was the author, the key author anyway, Ansel Keys, that did this 7-country study. And the 7-country study, I will say they kind of cherry-picked these countries, because I looked at the scatter graph that he picked these particular countries. Well, they fit his line, and he went out and said the Mediterranean people, they scored the highest on this, and the Finnish people, the Finnish men, it was actually just men that they looked at, but they didn't do so well. And so one of the things was his purpose in this was to prove that saturated fat was the cause of heart disease. And it turns out this linear graph showed that there was a small correlation between the Greek men over here with lower heart disease and the Finnish men up here. But what they didn't tell you is they forgot to even look at their carb data. Okay? And Minotti, it was Minotti, Italian co-author of that study. He looked at it, that was, I think it was 21 years later in 98 or 99, and he looked at the carb data, which they still had, but no one really looked at the fact that there was a large correlation between the sugar and the carb intake of these two groups. Okay? But by this time, 21 years later, it had been embedded in concrete, and this is what the entire medical community and medical pharmaceutical community had bought into, lock, stock, and barrel. It's all about saturated fat, and it was about that's what's causing the cholesterol problem. But anyway, hopefully we can talk a little bit about that later. So the Mediterranean diet, I bring it up here. I am not against it. If you ask me what my diet looks like, kind of my default is mostly Mediterranean. I have lots of fresh fruits, vegetables. I have some nuts and seeds, not huge amount. I will have plenty of fish. I will have some omega-3 olive oil. I will have a little bit of dairy, not much. I will have some meat. Some people will say, well, you have to have lean meat. Well, I don't know that the Mediterranean people were just eating lean products all the time. And going back to biblical times, I mean, the fat was for the Lord, okay? So you cut the fat out. So they weren't eating all the fat, but it was marbled in there in some of the meat they were eating. I think it was a diet that was there when Jesus walked the earth. And years ago, a friend of mine wrote a book. It was called, What Would Jesus Eat? Well, he ate a Mediterranean diet. And I don't know if you've ever been over to Israel, but I mean, I go there and I'm in heaven because I go, wow, my gosh, they've got everything on their buffet. And lots of fresh, healthy food. None of it was processed. So that kind of is my default diet. But like I said, I like variation. And if I want to go into a keto mode for a while, if I want to do some other mode for a while, there's reasons I use these in specific patients. And if you have any questions on any of these particular diets that I just mentioned, just write yourself a note, and then we'll talk about it at the question and answer time. Just a second. There was another diet that I didn't mention, and that was the Pritikin diet, Nathan Pritikin, and they put a lot of heart patients on that, trying to reverse it. It's almost just like the Ornish diet, except that it's a little bit more liberal in fat. 10 to 15% fat, as opposed to less than 10 with Ornish. But it's basically the same thing. High in carbohydrates, but not processed, and moderate proteins, about 15-20% of your calories. So, as far as considerations when tailoring your diet, I mentioned, the difference between endurance athletes or weight loss or, trying to gain muscle if you're sedentary, and then those with food sensitivities or autoimmune conditions. allergies, and that is picking a diet that will reduce the inflammation. I find that with many of these fad diets, this is why diets work or they don't work. The reason they work is little to do with the proclaimed reason. For example, vegan diet may eliminate dairy products, and someone says, this is great, now I feel wonderful. But they had lactose intolerance or they had a food sensitivity to whey protein. No wonder they felt better. But that's not the all in all, and it's not for every single person. In the carnivore diet, some people are getting enough, they're getting enough protein and fat now in their diet, which stimulates satiety. And they're going, oh my gosh, I'm losing weight. Well, that's because they're actually feeling full. Realize that when protein goes into your stomach, the first thing your stomach does is it recognizes, oh, we've got protein here, and it starts putting out hydrochloric acid. That's why we have hydrochloric acid in the stomach. It's a pre-digestive pouch, and it's breaking down that protein. So the protein is sitting there, and we throw in other, like a pepsin, another enzyme from the stomach. We're trying to prepare this protein, and it is sitting there. So the stomach is full, and it doesn't empty as quickly. Okay, and in fact, the stomach says, hold up, no one leaves here. I'm a stomach, I'm a pre-digestive pouch, and I am going to prepare this protein, and you fat and carbs, you just sit and wait. No pass go. Okay, so the stomach empties slower into the duodenum, and this is where real digestion takes place, and that's where you assimilate all of these nutrients across the intestinal barrier, and it goes into your bloodstream. So if your stomach is slowing like this and everything comes down here slower, you end up having food entering in like that. In the case of sugar, it doesn't spike, it does this. So everyone's heard of Ozempic or Mounjaro or Wegovy or, a lot of these new peptide drugs. What do? They slow the stomach from emptying, okay? So I've had many of my patients, when they came to me, I took them off that, weaned them off of their GLP-1 receptor agent, and I put them on a principle of having protein in their diet. It's interesting that many of these people on these peptides now, they do lose a lot of muscle mass. And the physical therapists across the country are commenting, wow, we have this, rash of sarcopenia, muscle loss. All these people we're having to treat because they lost so much weight. But these people on Ozempic or whatever, the semaglutide agents or tirzepatide, that's Mounjaro. They're not even thinking about what they're eating. They're just, I don't have as much appetite because I feel full all the time. So they'll just eat whatever, and they're eating horribly. And they were borderline on their protein before. Well, now they don't have enough protein, and they start losing more. But that doesn't happen with everyone. But the vast majority of Americans, they don't really think about what they're eating or if they're getting enough protein. So getting back to the stomach and it's emptying, okay, that's one principle that I try to stress, and that goes for 100% of all my diabetics. And I tell them, you have to have the protein in there because I want that to slow down. These drugs, by the way, were not designed for weight loss. They were designed for diabetics. Why? Because it's coming down slower. So that glucose that's in that meal is going to go in like that. It's not going to go in like this. If it goes in like this, you're going to spike your insulin. And what did Pastor Shane say about insulin? Well, it's your storage hormone. And that is how you make all fat. Well, for the most part. But the majority of people have that problem where they're spiking glucose, they're spiking insulin, they're making fat, and they don't get even 2 hours after their meal, okay, and they're already hungry. Well, that's because the stomach's empty, okay? By the way, carbs leave the stomach the fastest out of all of those. So the other thing that I tell them is also going to do the same thing, and that is eating vegetables. I want you to have vegetables. I want more above ground vegetables than below ground vegetables. Below ground, beets, carrots, onions, potatoes, sweet potatoes. Oh, those are bad? No, they're fine. I just said more above ground than below ground. And the above ground have lots of fiber, okay? And the fiber in those vegetables is going to slow down gastric emptying again. So you have vegetables, whole foods. This is really, it's not complex. It's not rocket science. And you have protein thrown in there. That stomach is emptying slower. And just by doing that, these people with these CGMs, the continuous glucose monitoring agents, they're amazed. Oh my gosh, I can't believe, my curve used to go like this every time. And now it's just like this, and I'm controlled just by making some minor changes in how they eat their food. But you do have to be cognizant of the protein you take in. You do need to be getting vegetables. It's really sad that in my practice, meeting all these patients, that they never eat a single vegetable. They hate vegetables. They hate it from when they were a kid. Well, I can't eat anything. But the guy weighs 500 pounds. Okay, real life. And it's really sad. And I said, wow, we've got to do a few things to change you. And that's going to take a while. But again, remember the protein, remember the fiber, the vegetables, and slowing that down. Wow, you're going to get a nice, steady absorption of energy, because that's what this is about. We'll talk about that. So, let me move on. Diets depend on the situation. So I mentioned just a minute ago, starting with cooking at home as much as you can with whole foods, vegetables, fruit. Limit the amount of processed carbohydrates in your diet. I'd say cut them out completely. And everyone should be eating adequate amount of protein. I put down 0.8 to 1.2 grams per kilo per day. If someone weighs 150, it's roughly 75 kilos. You're looking 1 gram per kilo. That would be 75 grams a day. That would be bare minimum. I prefer a little bit more, 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilo per day, and especially after exercise. And if someone's a bodybuilder, then we have to go way up beyond that. If you want muscle, you're going to have to increase the protein. And studies have not found higher levels of protein intake to be unsafe in patients without renal or kidney problems. If you're more sedentary and have trouble keeping weight off, try the higher fat protein or the keto diet. I used these for a while, especially, say, the guy that weighs 500 pounds. Wow, it's going to take us a while to burn all that off. When I started this back in the 80s, I think my first patient was 350, she was 42, and we went down to 150 in about a year and a half. And, well, she hadn't weighed 150 since before she was in 7th grade. So that was a big life changer. But again, it wasn't just getting her down there, but keeping it off. And that's where we get in. What Pastor Shane mentioned was you have to, yes, change your eating habits, but you have to increase that metabolism, getting it back up. So for the first time in her life, she was exercising. And I had her, because she weighed so much, I had to tape her ankles just so she could walk back and forth across the parking lot when she would see me. And that's how she started. A year later, she was actually lightly jogging. and she asked for permission to go to the gym. Well, I was living in Guatemala at the time, and there were no women in the gyms down there way back then. And so she was the only, and she was a North American, by the way. It's funny. Red-haired, big, and she was working out at the guys' gym. Well, anyway, she increased her muscle mass. She was able to maintain that off, and it was pretty amazing. So that's how I got started into this. It opened my eyes. If you're an endurance athlete or weightlifter, yeah, a little bit of carbs before and during a workout may be beneficial. Everyone thinks that, that's the only thing you burn when you're exercising. You're going to burn your glycogen, but a lot of endurance athletes are now doing intermittent fasting. Why would they do that? Well, they're training their body to actually become more efficient at burning fat. So when you're doing this, it's slow oxidative metabolism of fat. That's what you're burning a lot during those endurance races. And then you come to the end and you want glycogen stores. You want that surge. If anyone's ever done one of those events, I have, and you hit the wall, a marathon, and I don't know, 21, 22 miles, 26 is the finish, but you hit the wall and you have nothing. Well, this actually gives more of a reserve so you can pull that glycogen that you didn't burn into play here. Okay. If you struggle with inflammation or autoimmune conditions, multiple sclerosis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, ketogenic or a carnivore diet may be beneficial to prevent relapses, actually to cause some relapses, and calm the immune system down. So with the carnivore diet, they eliminate all the plants. Okay, well, you said the plants are good. Plants are good, but sometimes there are specific plant proteins that are triggering this disease. Okay, it's very, very complex. What I mentioned, food sensitivities, that's not a food allergy, but it's looking at IgG antibodies, and as opposed to IgE. And many patients having been already tested, we did everything looking at IgE. We found nothing. I found elevations in IgG. We eliminated 2 or 3 foods. Many of the times it was plant proteins. And everything reversed, and it was pretty amazing. And I can talk more about that later if you're interested. But it's a very useful tool. I mentioned with IgG food sensitivity there, if you struggle with GI issues or any other unexplained symptoms, it's good to get that testing done. But a lot of people, they would not tolerate, for instance, the FODMAP diet. My gosh, they would not get their irritable bowel syndrome controlled. They'd get worse. They were getting more bloating and gassing. Well, it's funny. It may not have been those particular foods. It was something else. But these are all tools that I'm describing here. So, in conclusion on the diets, there's no one-size-fits-all diet. Fads come and go. The principles are the same. And I don't teach diets. I teach principles. Again, I'm teaching you how to drive your vehicle. And what works for one person may not work for another person. The goal is to be metabolically flexible. Remember, carb lane, fat lane, being able to change when you want to. So let's look at some of these stressors and how they can be a valuable tool in the fight to maintain our health. So stressors, why are they important? With proper nutrition at the core of it all that I mentioned, that's in the center, the rest of these elements add acute stressors to the body. Is stress really a bad thing? Well, it depends. Paracelsus said the dose makes the poison. And stress can be a powerful weapon in the fight against aging. We're thinking, stress causes aging. No, we're talking about momentary stressors that cause your body to react, and then you move back into midline again, and your body is better and able to withstand and function at a higher level. Stress combined with a proper dose of relaxation leads to a host of antioxidant, anti-aging, and anabolic or, building up, like muscle, pathways that are essential to target if the goal is optimal health. Acute versus chronic stressors. Acute stressors like exercise, fasting, temperature-sensitive therapy all stress the body in different ways. So when the body recovers, it allows the cells to return to the baseline state, which is homeostasis. But as I mentioned, better. So all stress affects the body. It's how we perceive it, the duration and circumstances, how it will affect us. Anyway, there are multiple studies on this. I mentioned here one on depression, and it had to do with how people viewed their stress that they were going through. That affected their condition. So it's all about how you perceive it. But not just that, but the duration that you're in that. If you stay in it too long, doesn't matter how you perceive it. So I'm going to jump into exercise here. How sedentary are we? According to the CDC, only 28% of Americans are exercising enough. This means that 72% of Americans are missing out on one of the greatest preventive measures when it comes to health. The average American only walks around 3,000 to 4,000 steps per day, while the optimal range is around 10,000 for health and longevity. The reality is we're sitting about 9.5 hours a day in America. Now, when it comes to walking, okay, how far is 10,000 steps? Anyone know? Okay, it's about 5 miles. Okay, but you can get a lot in just walking here and there. Okay, but 5 miles. As far as this affects longevity, by the way, but for every 1,000 steps per day, you're increasing your longevity by about 10%. But it maxes out at about 12,000 steps per day. You don't get any added benefit, and it's one of those things that people just don't really think about it, and we'll try and cut out all of our walking time. We'll park at the parking spot closest to the store, okay, rather than park at the far end and get a few more steps in, okay. But that's a good thing. So 72% of Americans are missing out on one of the biggest things that could affect their health. So not exercising increases your risk of cardiovascular diseases, higher risk of heart disease, stroke, blood pressure elevation, cholesterol, metabolic disorders like type 2 diabetes. That's also type 3 diabetes, Alzheimer's, increased obesity. It's all related. Once you hit a BMI, body mass index, of 30, your risk of Alzheimer's triples. Okay? And that's why in America we have an epidemic now hitting of Alzheimer's. Remember, the obesity went from, in the 50s, we had about 10% of the population being obese. We had the majority of the population being normal weight, and then we had some that were overweight. Well, I told you the numbers earlier. That's completely, we just flipped the pyramid upside down. Okay? So very, very different. Mental health issues, okay, they increase. Depression increases. Cognitive decline increases with that. You have weaker muscles, bones, higher fracture risk. Sign me up, man. This reduced longevity, shorter lifespan, lower quality of life. He showed the video earlier of that man, two images of the same man. Okay, well, one's enjoying life, and there's no reason we shouldn't. And people tell me, oh, well, that's just what happens with aging. I go, no, what you're looking at is direct effects of the way you've been living. I have people that, come into my practice and they look like they're close to 90 and they're in their mid-50s. But that's been a really hard lifestyle. And a lot of it, there are things we can't choose and we can't avoid, but there's so much that we can. But again, we rationalize and we justify what we do. Other risk, poor sleep, weakened system from not exercising. And sleep, as Pastor Shane mentioned, this is one of the biggest factors that I look at with every patient that comes in to meet me, and we have a discussion about health. I always ask them, how do you sleep? How do you fall asleep? How long do you sleep? How do you feel when you get up? Does anyone watch you sleep? Okay. Really? Because, oh yeah, my wife says I snore a lot. You ever stop breathing? Okay. We have an epidemic of sleep apnea. And whoa, atrial fibrillation, left-sided heart failure, pulmonary artery hypertension, those, the latter two lead to something called sudden death. Anyway, atrial fibrillation has its own risk, but those all increase. So anyway, I go through sleep and I make sure that they are sleeping. If I'm trying to treat some chronic illness or disease or a patient with fibromyalgia, absolutely, sleep is like at the top of the list. So benefits of exercise. So we have digestive health. It improves your digestive activity, and of course it's going to prevent constipation. People know that if you exercise and do this, all of a sudden, he's regular again. Cognitive function. It stimulates neurogenesis. So years ago, we knew that it was an observation that children that were very active and just playing, not the ones that are gaming or whatever on their breaks, but they're very active. It seemed that they were scoring higher in class on their test. So it led to experiments. They wanted to see if the exercise had anything to do with brain development. And sure enough, they used animals, and they used their brains to look at, but they found that if these animals would exercise, that they could produce new brain cells. Now, when I went through school, and it wasn't until, maybe 25 years, maybe less than 25 years ago, we believed that you were going to be born with all the brain cells you're ever going to get, okay? And then, we make all these connections, and then we go through a massive pruning somewhere in our youth, okay? And then we start branching out more, but you still only have the same number, okay? You never get any more. Well, it's not true. If you exercise and, a little bit of, cardiometabolic exercise is probably the best, but it stirs up neurogenesis, new brain cells. Where? In these little structures called the hippocampi. It means seahorse. Anyway, and those are central processing centers, and this is where you do all your critical thinking. That's a lot of your processing. And this is where you're storing all of this information we're saying right now. It's going into your hippocampi, one on either side. And then it gets uploaded to your cortex when? When you're sleeping. And that's why the sleep is also majorly important. So if you don't get the deep, restful sleep at night, because there's different stages. It's not just awake, sleep, like that. Multiple stages. And at different stages, different things happen. But we have to get into one of these deeper levels to be able to upload and wring out the sponge so that your hippocampi are empty. Okay? What for? The next day. You ever, gone and, well, I only got 3 hours of sleep. I can't think. I can't function. Man, I can't learn anything. Well, that's because your hippocampi they didn't get wrung out. Okay? They didn't get restored. And if you're studying for a lot of exams, the worst thing you could do is cram. I'm going to stay up an extra 2 hours. Man, I've got this exam in the morning. The best thing you could do is, you can't think, you can't focus anymore. Go to bed, go to sleep. Okay, wake up an hour or two early, and it will be better than trying to work through that. Okay, so critical for that. The other thing that the exercise does is it protects the brain from rising levels of cortisol. Okay, it decreases your stress. Of course, you're going to have less cortisol, but it protects your brain from rising levels of cortisol. What does cortisol do to hippocampal cells? It shrivels and shrinks them, okay, and they end up dying. So you start losing them when you're stressed. Oh, no wonder I can't think. Okay, so what I mentioned about the exercise, when you exercise and you create these new brain cells, okay, you only have about 4 days max to use them. If you don't, they get reabsorbed. You lose them. Okay? But if you read, study something, you're doing something analytical, critical processing, okay, whether you're doing math, you're learning a piece of music or a foreign language, or you're actually analyzing stuff. I don't care what it is, working in your garage and organizing stuff and creating a project. It's something where you're using your brain. That sends out these little dendrites and it makes those connections. Now you're hardwired. Well, that's it? I go, yeah, you keep those cells, okay? And you can use them. So you can actually regenerate and help your brain in its function. What structure gets hit very early on in Alzheimer's dementia? Well, you guessed it, the hippocampi. And so they do, volumetric MRI imaging of these hippocampi in these patients, and you can see where they actually... It's the MRI, but we're looking at the volume inside those structures. They're actually shrinking. And so you can improve your hippocampi, your brain function, the neurogenesis. So mood enhancement. We also know that the exercise reduces symptoms of depression and anxiety. And we've known this for years. And I did see a study in the last year, and it was dealing with exercise versus one of the SSRIs, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, Prozac, Zola, Paxil, Lexapro, citalopram, or Celexa. All of those are the SSRIs. But anyway, it was a head-to-head study, and it looked like, whoa, it performs equally well exercise versus the antidepressant. Okay, and maybe even a little better, depending on how you look at the data. But it also had a little bit of synergy if you added the exercise to the SSRI. Okay, so it actually made things better. But you would think that this would be a slam dunk. This is going to be prescribed and recommended by all physicians. No, not so. The majority of these medications are prescribed by primary care doctors. The psychiatrists, they know this, and it's part of their prescription for the most part, because they're up to speed on that. Psychologists, counselors, therapists, they all know about this, and so they're going to be recommending. So the first thing when someone comes in, I say, well, did your therapist recommend this? Oh, yes, they did. Okay, well, this is good. Okay, but again, you actually need to do the exercise. Yeah, but I don't feel like it. I go, it's part of your prescription. You want me to write it down? So, okay. So anyway, it's crazy good as far as effects on your mood enhancement. And we've always known about the endorphins and the runner's high. Yeah, these are feel-good molecules, okay? They make you feel good, but they're actually very good, healthy signaling molecules for your body. They do help you function better. Insomnia relief, so it improves the quality of your sleep, but also reducing sleep onset latency. So that means, okay, how long before you go to sleep from when you lay down? So what is the average? Okay, it's actually 10 to 20 minutes from the time lights are out, you're laying down there, and your mind actually goes into a sleep mode. If it's like within 2 minutes, you may have a problem, okay? Like you're sleep deprived or something, okay? But if it's longer than that, okay, then we're looking at some form of insomnia. But the other thing I mentioned were, the levels of sleep. So if you had, some kind of caffeine product, okay, caffeine's in green tea, caffeine is in chocolate, okay, caffeine, okay, we know all the other products that have caffeine, okay, but everyone, again, metabolizes caffeine differently too. Why? SNPs, okay? We all metabolize these molecules at a different rate, and it causes problems. But it will affect your sleep, the quality of your sleep. Oh, yeah, but I slept. I go, well, not as well as you could have. The other one is the alcohol. And I said, oh, yeah, I ex-nay on that one. You need to eliminate that altogether. Oh, no, but I need that to go to sleep. Or that's just my habit. I have it every evening. Well, guess what? You may not sleep as well. What about these people? They just drink until they just pass out. And I go, yeah, but they wake up feeling like they didn't have any sleep, right? Okay? So the alcohol does not allow you to, you go through, you may be doing this all night. You'll never get down into that deep sleep or the REM sleep. Oxygen delivery. Okay, so we know exercise enhances efficiency of oxygen uptake and utilization, okay, throughout your body. It strengthens your ventilatory muscles. But this thing over here on mechanisms, increase VO2 max, well, that actually is increasing the efficiency of oxygen uptake and its delivery through your body and uptake in the tissues. So that's a very good thing that athletes are looking for, performance athletes, triathletes, long-distance runners, cyclists, they're all looking to increase their VO2 max. Most people never have that tested. It's very expensive and cumbersome to do. And then, of course, we know about enhanced muscle endurance. But I'm telling my patients, I want you to exercise. But you said it wasn't that important. I said, no, 90% is your nutrition. But the exercise is so important for all these reasons, and it's going to affect your metabolism, because the more muscle you have, okay, the greater your metabolism will be. And so I don't want it to drop. I want it to maintain or increase. And I may come back to that. So optimal exercise levels. The importance of balanced exercise. There was a study by Dr. James O'Keefe. He's a cardiologist out of Kansas City, I think. Anyway, he looked at the amount of exercise. What is the sweet spot? How much exercise do we need before we don't gain anymore, or it's actually deleterious? And he's pretty much, I think he was an endurance athlete, and he was going all the time and pushing the limit. And he was a little surprised with what they found, but it was a very good study. It was back in 2023. So anyway, he kind of came up with maybe 150 minutes of moderate exercise per week. Moderate exercise is where you can do some type of, you're walking or you're well, not when you're swimming, you can't talk, but I was going to say, as long as you can carry on a conversation, that's moderate exercise. But light swimming, walking, maybe playing tennis, not hard tennis, but lots of different exercises. We're not talking about the high-intensity exercise or pushing it. That's for the younger folk, by the way. But when it comes to moderate exercise, there is no max. You can do as much as you want. But as far as the benefit, if you're doing it, you'll end up getting about, you increase your longevity. It's about 45-48%. But he adds in here 75 minutes of vigorous training per week. Now, vigorous training, that would be if someone were doing a lot of really hard running or cycling or something like that. But people say, well, I do a lot more than that. And I go, well, yeah, okay. But we're just talking about where do you find your sweet spot? So they do these curves, and we see a kind of a J curve, well, your longevity starts increasing as you increase the time of your exercise. But then if you go too far, your longevity this is actually meaning you're dropping. You're past. In fact, it's worse than if you were doing nothing, if you were a couch potato, which is kind of sad. But there is a point where you can overdo it. So I know I've talked with Pastor Shane about this before, and is saying you have to work out smarter, not harder. And I had to, think about that as I was getting older. When I was in my mid-40s, I started to see some changes. So I have to back off here. I have to change my strategy. How can I optimize this as far as my overall health? So he said 75 minutes of vigorous training, and that could be like 20 to 30 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week, depending on how you structure it. Then the resistance training, that was another thing, 2 or 3 times per week. Now, lifting with weights, there are people that do, 1 or 2 hours a day, okay? And, well, they're trying to build a lot of muscle, but as far as improvement in longevity, you really don't gain a lot more past about 75 minutes. Well, let's just take the actual time that you're lifting being 75 minutes rather than not the time you're in your gym, because you have to have time in between sets and, changing different exercises. But saying about that amount of time, so we want to avoid the extremes to prevent overtraining. Risk of over-exercising. Well, this is interesting. Increased risk of atrial fibrillation. So people over 40 to 45, if they have super high intensity exercise, that could be distance running triathlons, intense competitive cycling, they have a 500 to 800% increased risk of atrial fibrillation. Okay, well, I saw this when it first came out, and I thought, excuse me. Oh my gosh, this can't be so. But the more I looked at it and the data, okay, it confirms, yeah, there is that. And that's what we were seeing in a lot of these athletes. And it was kind of embarrassing. Well, I shouldn't have this, why? Why is this happening? The potential for coronary artery calcification. So the coronary artery calcium score, we were finding this number was going up, and I really thought, oh, come on, we have studies, showing this, showing that. I always read studies. I don't believe them when they first come out. I have to analyze them. But I will say this one was very concerning. So going into the data on that, this was in the extremes of performance athletes, okay? But this wasn't in the younger. This is just in the older. It seemed to accelerate coronary artery calcium score. So, like I said, you need to work out smarter, not harder, and we need to understand what really changes. There's so much more that we have to learn about this, so many more questions to answer. So finding the right exercise intensity and volume for longevity. With moderate exercise, I mentioned walking, recreational cycling or light swimming. The thing they found was the social benefits and the group exercises. It was over in, it was in Denmark, the Copenhagen study, where they looked at this and they found that the exercise that improved longevity the most was tennis. Think of tennis or pickleball, and well, why? It had to do with the socialization. Okay, it's that you're doing this with other people. Now, I don't know if that's, the same going to the gym and working out with a guy, and he's spotting you with the weights and then you shift and all that. I don't know. I think there would be a benefit there. But anyway, the tennis with moderate exercise, we weren't looking at resistance or any of these others. But the tennis, well, if you look at running, swimming, cycling, 3.5 years. Weightlifting and treadmill, 1.5 years. Okay. Wow. Well, why? It has to do with the socialization. And this is the way the Lord wired us. This is the way He made us. There are physiological benefits, enhanced cardiovascular health, and improved metabolic function that we mentioned. And I mentioned earlier a 45% drop in all-cause mortality with moderate exercise. So, do I recommend just moderate? No. I recommend all of them. But it's the amount and the duration. Types of exercise strength training. So we increase our muscle strength, bone density, enhancing metabolic health. And we actually can add, with the strength training, an additional 19% drop in all-cause mortality. So you have 45%. Now you're looking at 45, 64% drop in all-cause mortality just by maintaining your exercise levels. 40 to 60 minutes per week. That's kind of what I was mentioning. But I don't know, I think you could extend that out to 75 or so. 40 to 60 is kind of like right in the middle. But you could easily extend it out to 75 minutes per week if you're doing strength training, resistance workouts. And again, if you don't have a trainer, it would be good to have a trainer if you've never done this before, but having your sets at 70 to 85% of your 1 rep maximum, and doing 10 reps or no more than that. As far as that should be your limit, okay? So you need to up the strength. If you start doing exercise with resistance, what you started off with should definitely change, 2 months later. Okay, it's going to change. You will not have the same effect because your body's going to adjust and say, we don't need to build any more muscle. We just need to build it. So you just get endurance. You need specific exercises. You need to get a combination of exercises put together if you're working in the gym. Proper form is essential. And then the next thing that's important is proper form. And then the next thing is proper form. So it's all about doing it right, okay? The next is high-intensity interval training. Well, high intensity is bad. No, this is what I do every day. I start off in the morning, and I will do these short bursts, intense activity. And what it is large muscle groups, rapidly activated for brevity, very short time. So this is 3 to 5 minute bursts, repeated multiple times a day. I won't even get to the point. I mean, I don't think I break a sweat, but I do it for 5 minutes straight, and it's pretty quick, and I'm used to doing it, and then I go and start my day. But I actually do that after I get out of the shower, before, because I really don't, generate a lot from that. But what it does, it's what we refer to as a nitric oxide dump. And nitric oxide, one of the most important molecules in your body. There's a lot of important ones, but nitric oxide causes vasodilation. Nitric oxide is what Viagra releases. Okay, that's how it works. They were trying to find a coronary vasodilator, and they accidentally found it worked better for something else. Okay? But nitric oxide, that's what it releases. Well, then you should just do it for a long time. I go, no. A lot of the researchers were puzzled at this. Well, why don't we see these same effects? Because they studied cardio, and they studied resistance, and then they studied high-intensity interval training like this, these really short, brief bursts. They went head-to-head, and they found out, whoa, this is the only group that gets the massive mitochondrial replication and growth. This is the only group that gets growth hormone boosting. This is the only group that gets the testosterone to the levels. These get some, but this outperformed. Well, that's crazy. I mean, you're not doing anything. That's probably the biggest problem I'll come across with patients is, yes, it actually does something. Well, it can't do anything. It's like nothing. And I go, it's what I've been doing this for years, okay? Now, if you do cardio, if you do resistance later in the day, and you have to have at least a 2-hour break, or that nitric oxide doesn't have its magical effects, okay? But if you do those exercises later, you get more bang for your buck. And any trainer worth his salt is going to know this. He's going to get more yield from his clients if he incorporates high-intensity interval. Now, there are classes at the gyms, high intensity, and they're doing this for like 35 minutes or something. I'm not talking about that. That, I think, is too stressful, okay? That's more of the high intensity that I was talking about earlier. So, practical recommendations. Incorporating moderate exercise, strength training, and HIIT. That's what I was referring to. And that schedule that I just mentioned, I do the HIIT first thing in the morning. I may do it in the middle of the day. I can actually do this stuff in my office. I just close the door at lunchtime. I can do it very quickly, 5 minutes, boom, okay? And no one knows the difference, okay, except for me. And the other thing to note here is the overtraining. You really want to watch for signs and symptoms. If your body feels tired and it aches a little bit, that's fine. That's normal. But if you're really feeling run down and you're really hurting and the pain doesn't go away, we may have something else. So recovery strategies, we'll come to that. So exercise and longevity, it's an integral part to successful healthy aging. Muscle mass is a predictor of longevity in older adults. And in fact, some of these recent studies suggest that muscle mass in the elderly is a better predictor of survival than the body mass index. Okay? So as we get older, we get sarcopenia. That's just muscle loss. And as we mentioned earlier, having that muscle is so important for your metabolism. But it's important because you need strong bones, okay? and it decreases your risk of falling. Regular moderate exercise can reduce mortality around 35 to 42%. That was from the AMA. What I mentioned earlier was that quote of 45%. There's a lot of studies that show the same thing. Wow, so why don't we do it? It's free. I don't have a membership in a gym, okay? I do have some equipment at home, and I do all these other things on my own, but if you have a gym, that's great, because I think gyms are fun. The reality is we all need the proper balance of exercise and rest. It's well suited for our age and abilities to maximize health. So, conclusions on exercise. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. George Bernard Shaw.